In a city just 3 square miles wide, sitting almost entirely inside Detroit, the streetlights were physically pulled out of the ground, not turned off. Pulled out, poles and all, over 1,000 of them, because the town could no longer pay the electric bill. That town once had 50,000 people, elegant homes, and one of the most famous factories in American history sitting inside its borders. Today it has fewer than 9,000 residents, and parts of it go pitch black after sunset. That is where this list ends, and we will get there. This is a countdown of 12 Michigan communities that, for very well-documented reasons, consistently show up as the toughest places in the state to build a life. Every one of them is a real town with real people who love it. And every one of them has a story behind why it struggles. We are not here to mock anybody or make cheap jokes about a place going through hard times. We are here to lay out the facts, plainly, the way you would want a friend to tell you before you signed a lease or made an offer on a house. Crime numbers, population loss, poverty rates, and infrastructure problems, sourced from FBI data, census figures, and local reporting, not rumors, not comment section hearsay. And to be fair, almost every town on this list also has something worth respecting. Some piece of history, some genuine natural beauty, or some community grit that keeps people there even when the spreadsheet says otherwise. We will name that too every single time. Because a list that only shows you the bad half isn't actually honest. Before we get into the list, if you are new here, go ahead and hit subscribe, because we cover towns and cities all over the country with the same honest, no hype approach. And I am curious where you are watching from today. Drop your state, or if you are in Michigan, drop your county down in the comments. It helps me know who is actually watching and what to cover next. Starting at number 12, we have Harper Woods, a small city tucked against Detroit's eastern edge with a population just over 15,000. Harper Woods sits close to the Grosse Points, and on the surface it looks like a quiet, tree-lined suburb. But its overall crime rate runs more than double the national average, driven mostly by property crime. And its proximity to Detroit means it absorbs some of the same economic pressure without the tax base to match. To be fair, Harper Woods still has solid, affordable housing stock and easy access to the freeway system, which is exactly why some buyers overlook the crime numbers. Just don't overlook them yourself. Number 11 is Jackson, roughly halfway between Detroit and Chicago in south-central Michigan. Jackson has a real interesting history as a prison town and an early auto manufacturing hub, and its downtown has genuine architectural character. But recent rankings using FBI crime data put the odds of being a victim of violent crime in Jackson at somewhere around 1 in 84, which is a sobering number for a city its size. Manufacturing decline hit Jackson the way it hit much of the state, and recovery has been slow and uneven across different neighborhoods. If you're drawn to the history, know that it comes bundled with a crime picture that deserves real attention. At number 10, we head back to the downriver area southwest of Detroit for Ecorse. This is one of the oldest communities in the region, and it once had one of the most productive steel mills on the Great Lakes, employing well over 10,000 people at its peak. When that industry contracted through the 70s and 80s, the workforce collapsed to a fraction of its former size, and the city eventually landed in receivership, then decades of state financial oversight. Ecorse still has genuine waterfront charm along the Detroit River, with real potential for anyone who values access to the water over square footage. But the tax base that once supported the town simply isn't there anymore, and that shows up in services and upkeep. Number 9, right next door, is River Rouge. Like Ecorse, River Rouge grew up around heavy industries, shipbuilding, and steel, and it hit its population peak back in 1950. Today it sits at roughly a third of that number. Recent data puts unemployment in River Rouge at more than double the state average, with a poverty rate near 40%. What's genuinely admirable here is how tight-knit the remaining community is. Longtime residents talk about River Rouge the way you'd talk about a hometown you'd never trade, even knowing the economic numbers don't lie. At number 8, Muskegon Heights, a small city of around 10,000 people on Michigan's west side near the shore of Lake Michigan. This is a town that gets flagged repeatedly in state crime rankings, with both violent and property crime rates landing well above the 90th percentile compared to other cities its size. Muskegon Heights lost most of its industrial employment base decades ago and has struggled since to rebuild it. What keeps it on people's radar anyway is genuine proximity to Muskegon Lake and the broader lakeshore, plus a close, resilient community that has weathered real hardship. The location is a draw. The safety numbers are the honest catch. Number 7 takes us south to Battle Creek, a city most people know from its cereal industry history. Kellogg and Post both got their start here, and that legacy is still visible downtown. But recent small city safety studies that factor in violent crime, property crime, and traffic fatalities have placed Battle Creek near the very bottom of Michigan's rankings 2 years running, with the city sitting in roughly the 3rd percentile nationally for overall safety. The manufacturing base has diversified since the cereal era, which is a genuine positive, but the crime numbers haven't caught up with that progress yet. At number 6, Pontiac. Once the beating heart of General Motors production and the namesake of an entire car brand, Pontiac's population has held fairly steady at just over 60,000, but the poverty rate sits above 24%. Nearly double the statewide figure, and per capita income trails well behind the county average. The city has real bones, wide boulevards, solid old architecture, and it sits close enough to Oakland County's wealthier suburbs that redevelopment talk never fully goes away. But that redevelopment has been slow to reach most neighborhoods, and the economic gap between Pontiac and the towns surrounding it is stark and easy to see once you drive through. Number 5, Saginaw, in the middle of the state along the river that shares its name. Saginaw's total crime rate runs close to 80% above the national average, with a violent crime index that consistently ranks among the highest in Michigan. Like so many towns on this list, Saginaw built its identity around auto parts manufacturing, and when that base contracted, the city lost both jobs and population it never fully recovered. To Saginaw's credit, there are real revitalization efforts underway downtown, and the surrounding county still offers some genuinely beautiful, affordable rural land. The city core is where the numbers get hardest to ignore. At number 4, Benton Harbor, on the shore of Lake Michigan in the southwest corner of the state. This is a small city, under 10,000 people, roughly 45% of whom live below the poverty line. Benton Harbor made national news when lead was found in its drinking water starting in 2018, a crisis that took years and sustained state intervention to meaningfully address through service line replacement. The city is also headquarters to Whirlpool, a major global company, which creates an unusual and painful contrast between corporate wealth and neighborhood poverty just blocks apart. Benton Harbor sits right on the lake with genuinely beautiful natural surroundings, which is part of why its struggles feel so pointed. The water crisis has seen real progress in recent years, but the underlying poverty numbers remain some of the toughest in the state. Number 3, Flint. You likely already know the name, and for good reason. Flint's own water crisis in the mid-2010s became a national symbol of infrastructure failure. And while the city's water system has since been remediated and meets federal standards again, the reputational and public health scars run deep. Beyond water, recent small city safety rankings have placed Flint at the very bottom in Michigan for overall safety, factoring in violent crime, property crime, and traffic and overdose deaths. Flint's population has fallen to under 80,000, a fraction of its mid-century peak as an auto manufacturing powerhouse. What deserves real credit is Flint's cultural resilience. The city has a genuine, proud identity, active community organizations, a growing arts and food scene downtown, and a level of civic pride that outsiders often underestimate. That pride doesn't erase the challenges, but it's real, and it matters, especially in a city that has been unfairly reduced to a single headline by people who've never actually driven through it. At number 2, Highland Park, the town we opened this video with. Highland Park is almost entirely surrounded by Detroit, just under 3 square miles, and it was once one of the wealthiest, most consequential small cities in America. Henry Ford built his first moving assembly line here, and Chrysler's world headquarters sat in Highland Park for decades. When Chrysler relocated in the 1990s, it took millions in tax revenue with it, and Highland Park's finances never recovered. The city fell tens of millions of dollars into debt, lost roughly 84% of its population since its 1930 peak, and in 2011, the local utility physically removed more than 1,000 streetlights because the city couldn't pay the bill. As of recent reporting, Highland Park has continued weighing municipal bankruptcy over unpaid water debt. The Ford plant, where that assembly line started, is now a protected historical landmark, a strange and moving reminder of just how far the city has fallen from its own origin story. What's remarkable is that people still choose to stay, citing genuine neighborhood loyalty, tight-knit block associations, and a piece of American industrial history that quite literally started on their street. It is one of the most sobering case studies of urban decline in the entire country. And honestly, one every homebuyer researching Metro Detroit should understand before they get swept up in a low listing price 2 blocks from a city with a much bigger tax base. Before we get to number 1, I want to pause for a second. If a video like this is useful to you, the honest kind that tells you what the glossy relocation blogs and real estate listings leave out, sharing it or subscribing genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are trying to make a real decision about where to live. It costs you nothing, and it means a lot on our end. And now, number 1. Detroit. This is the city that anchors nearly every list like this one, and the numbers explain why. Detroit's overall crime rate remains roughly 180% above the national average, and by some measures the city still ranks among the most dangerous large cities in the country. Detroit's population collapsed from a peak of nearly 1.9 million in 1950 to under 640,000 by 2020, the sharpest sustained decline of any major American city. Driven by decades of deindustrialization as the auto industry automated, relocated, and contracted. And here is the honest twist, the one the cold open promised you. Detroit has been genuinely improving. Homicides in 2024 fell to their lowest level since 1965. Non-fatal shootings dropped by a quarter year over year. Overall violent crime fell more than 7%, also its lowest mark since the 1960s. The population grew for a second straight year as of the most recent Census Bureau report, the first sustained growth Detroit has seen in nearly 70 years. Detroit's decline traces back to the same deindustrialization story we've heard on nearly every stop of this list, just on a far bigger scale. Auto plants automated, moved to the suburbs, moved out of state, or moved overseas, and the tax base that once supported one of America's great industrial cities shrank right along with them, leaving behind entire neighborhoods of vacant lots and boarded-up homes that the city is still working through today. So Detroit earns the top spot on this list not because it is static or hopeless, but because its baseline numbers are still severe enough to top the state, even while the trend line is bending in a genuinely hopeful direction. That combination, real risk and real recovery happening at the same time, is what makes Detroit impossible to leave off a list like this, and impossible to write off entirely either. So here's the honest thread that runs through all 12 of these places. Not one of them declined by accident. Every single one traces back to the same root causes: a manufacturing base that left faster than anything replaced it, tax revenue that dried up along with the jobs, and decades of underinvestment that compounded on itself year after year until the gap became almost impossible to close from the inside. These towns didn't fail their residents so much as the broader economy failed them first. And the people who stayed are often the ones with the deepest roots, the fewest options to leave, or the most stubborn love for a place that raised them and their parents before that. That's worth respecting, even when the safety and economic numbers say to think twice before signing a lease. It also means the story in most of these towns isn't finished. Some, like Detroit and Benton Harbor, are showing real, measurable progress. Others still have a long road ahead. Knowing the difference is exactly why we do the research instead of just repeating a list we found somewhere else. If you were weighing a move to Michigan, this list isn't meant to scare you off the whole state. Plenty of towns here are thriving. It's meant to make sure you walk in with your eyes open. So tell me in the comments, is there a town on this list you'd actually still consider moving to, knowing the full picture? And if you're a current or former resident of any of these 12 places, I'd genuinely like to hear what we got right and what we missed, because nobody knows a town better than the people who've lived it. Either way, this list will still be here for the next person trying to make sense of a move to Michigan without relying on a real estate listing that only shows you the good angles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.